The Leader of the House has moved that motion. The question is the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those to the contrary say no. I think the ayes have it, and that's an absolute majority, isn't it? And an absolute majority is required for that. Having counted the House, an absolute majority is present. Are there any further motions without notice? We move now to non-government business. Non-government business number 1, RSPCA function and role. The Honourable Rick Mazza.
Thank you, Mr President. I move that this House calls on the Government to investigate whether the RSPCA is transforming from an animal welfare society into an animal rights activist and is losing its original core values and community respect as a credible organisation.
The question is that motion be agreed to. The Honourable Rick Mazza.
Thank you, Mr President. Before I commence the speech, I would like to make it perfectly clear that I believe that the RSPCA plays a very important role on animal welfare within our community. And I raise this issue today because I'm concerned that this fine institution doesn't lose its way and become something that the community doesn't support. I'll refer to, again, the brochure from the Field and Game Association. And in fact, the Honourable Simon O'Brien touched on this in his budget reply speech, where British Conservative MP Glyn Davies told a packed House of Commons earlier this year that he wanted his RSPCA back. In my mind, the RSPCA was always an animal welfare body. That's how I always saw it. But I must admit, I'm finding it more and more an animal rights body, he said. Another Conservative MP, Simon Hart, said that the RSPCA's prosecuting role needs to be monitored given its political and commercial activities. Members, there seems to be a lot of parallels between what's happening in the UK and what's happening in Western Australia. And I want it on record that I want my RSPCA back. The Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was established in Victoria in 1871, and it was established to prevent the mistreatment of horses. Later in that century, there were further branches set up in Tasmania and other states of Australia, and eventually Western Australia in 1892. Its charter was always animal welfare. However, in the 80s, the RSPCA began to evolve somewhat and took on more of a role and became more political. In fact, on its webpage, Political Animal Australia, it has emotive pictures of puppies with hangdog eyes, which are, pretty hard to resist. But when you look behind that website, they want to ban many things, including rodeos and even pigeon racing. And of course, they're against live export. And my major concern is that the community is losing trust and is starting to view the RSPCA with some suspicion. Earlier this year, while campaigning out in my region, in the agricultural region, and a few trips that I've made recently, I talked to many people out through the Central Wheat Belt, a lot of farmers, people at farm supply depots and other businesses within those small rural towns. And it seems to be quite a common thread that people are concerned about where the RSPCA is heading with its charter. They're very concerned that they're beginning to evolve into more of an animal rights organisation, which doesn't fit what the community expects. And it's not just me and the community that feels that way. In fact, the president of the Pastoral Graziers Association, Rob Gillum, expressed his wariness of the RSPCA, and on his website, on a news item, he states, if the RSPCA truly wants to distance itself from the animal liberation activists that have permeated its ranks and are using the organisation as a platform to end all livestock production, then they need to acknowledge that the live export trade is not cruel and inhumane, and work with industry to improve animal welfare standards in developing nations. Now, I agree with Rod Gillam on that. The RSPCA should not be opposing live export. It should be working with government to make sure that it establishes the correct protocols and systems of welfare in place to ensure that the trade operates on an animal welfare level that's acceptable to the community. And of course, a lot of those destination ports could do with improvement of animal welfare, but by banning the trade, Australia loses its influence on those ports of destination to improve things there. Also, the Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association President Ken Warriner is bitterly disappointed by the media prominence afforded by the RSPCA's call to ban sheep and cattle sale yards. He is also disillusioned by the RSPCA's direction, saying that the organisation wanted to shut down everything. But where does it stop, he said. And so it goes on. Even in Narrogin, Narrogin farmer Janet Thompson was very concerned about the RSPCA, and the RSPCA, in response to must be the Narrogin Observer, I think, said that the RSPCA said it was concerned that Mrs Thompson was misinformed about the mandate of the RSPCA and its role in Australia agriculture. But Mrs Thompson disagreed and said she believed the RSPCA had had a good past record in advancing awareness of good care of animals, but things had changed. So you can see, members, that there is quite a lot of concern within the community and community groups about where the RSPCA is heading. In questioning during the estimates hearings a couple of weeks back, I asked the department whether they granted funds to the RSPCA, and the Honourable Ken Baston said that it was $500,000 per year that was granted to the RSPCA each year. And I asked how the department reconciled granting $500,000 a year to an organisation when that organisation openly opposes the department's major initiative, which it's spending almost $300 million on, of live export. In fact, the department head, Mr Delaney, said it is true that they also have a lobbying function and that they are unashamed about that. I think we're able to successfully work with their regulatory and education areas, but clearly there are occasions when we're going in opposite directions. Members, last week the Royal Agricultural Society had a wonderful address out in the courtyard, and if you missed it, you certainly missed out. It showcased a lot of the agricultural products that we have in Western Australia, but I was particularly taken by a young lady by the name of Stephanie Coombs, only 23 years old. Now, Stephanie is a very impressive young lady, and she won the National Australia Bank's Agribusiness Rising Beef Industry Championship. I was very taken by Stephanie's story for such a young person. She grew up in the North Metro area and in fact joined Animals Australia and had a view as a teenager of animals. Later she ventured out into the country and started to work in country areas with livestock and went on to educate herself in the agricultural industry. What was very interesting in her speech is that she then took trips on livestock carriers, and from the farm gate to the port of destination experienced firsthand how the live export trade operates. Now, when Stephanie returned, on social media she described her experiences of the live export trade with the positive outcomes that she found. What was the response? Hate mail. How do you rationalise that? It seems that a lot of people who are anti-live export or anti-everything don't want to know the truth. as soon as the truth is told to them, hate mail. Appalling. Members, one thing that we've got to be very mindful of too is that the RSPCA is in an extraordinary situation where it has been delegated certain powers. I don't know of any other private body, in fact, that are delegated that level of power. We have to be very careful that the RSPCA doesn't abuse that power. In fact, in an article that I pulled from their website, they said that the RSPCA inspectors are appointed under state and territory animal welfare legislation. This legislation gives inspectors a range of powers to investigate cases of animal cruelty and enforce animal welfare law. These powers are similar in nature to those afforded to police officers. In the course of investigating animal cruelty offences, inspectors are empowered to enter property, seize animals, seize evidence of animal cruelty offences, issue animal welfare notices, issue on-the-spot fines, initiate prosecution under animal welfare legislation. Now, members, I don't have a problem with the prosecution of people who mistreat animals. What I have a major problem with is we have an organisation delegated these extraordinary powers as a non-government body. Now, we all know that government bodies are subject to Auditor General scrutiny, estimates hearing, interrogation, all sorts of safety checks and balances to make sure that those government departments do not move outside of their term of reference and they serve the community in an unbiased, balanced way. I don't believe that we have those checks and balances and safety mechanisms in the RSPCA. Now, I don't for 1 minute say that they're abusing those powers, but the potential is there, and there have been many people who have described that maybe they have been misused. Members, a large part of our community is disillusioned with the RSPCA. They believe in many cases that they have just gone too far. I'm very concerned, as are many other free-thinking Australians, that the great institution that we once all respected, and I must confess that in the past I regularly donated to, is losing credibility, and that would be a great shame for the RSPCA in this state. Now, I know it's a very emotive issue. As soon as we talk about animal welfare and little puppies, and we heard about Princess and we heard about Rex this week, everybody loves their pets. And there's no problem with that. At the same token, we must balance that with sensible, accountable systems to ensure that an organisation, a special organisation like the RSPCA, because as I say, there's no other organisation I know of that's delegated those sorts of powers or granted those sorts of funds for its operation, is not permeated, in the words of Rob Gillam, or hijacked by extreme views of activists, and its integrity diminished, and the suspicion and mistrust is starting to build up within the community. Thank you, Mr. President.
The question is the motion be agreed to. The Minister for Agriculture and Food.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the honourable member for this motion that he's put up today. I have to say it's interesting, and I guess my sentiments would have been right down those lines until I've actually come a little more involved as the Minister responsible for the cruelty to animals for the Act, which is something like 65 pages long. Not that I've read the whole Act yet. Can I just say, though, that we need to make sure that we actually have something clear, and that is, of course, that the Animal Welfare Society versus the animal rights political activist organisations which are springing up. And I note that two of those, of course, are the Animal Liberation Australia and PETA, the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals. And let me take some of these in turn. The Animal Liberation Australia was set up in 1976 and is based on a well-known best-selling book, Animal Liberation, by a gentleman called Peter Singer, I believe. The book sold the idea that animals should live in the wild and no animals should live in captivity. Peter, the other organisation, has a simple slogan that animals are not ours to eat or wear. You will often see them in the media running campaigns with very scantily dressed celebrities selling the virtues of being a vegan. But these organisations, Animal Liberation Australia and the Ethical Animals, are clearly hardcore animal right activists. And I think we need to not get that mixed up with the RSPCA. The RSPCA and I, of course, disagree on one thing, and that's I support livestock export, and they don't. But can I just say what the purpose of the RSPCA is, and they need to stick to this, of course, as the Honourable Rick Mazza said, and that is they shall be to promote animal welfare and kindness to animals, prevent or suppress cruelty to animals, and do all such lawful acts as society may consider conducive or incidental to the Department of the purpose. And of course, some of those activities that I actually take out is when we give $500,000 to the RSPCA, they play a role that the government couldn't. And in Western Australia, the last financial year, the RSPCA received more than 20,000 calls relating to animal cruelty and neglect. Interesting enough, there were 2,787 cruelty complaints investigated by inspectors and 14 routine inspections on pet stores, sale yards, ports and other sites. Prosecutions should be always the last resort. There were only 8 prosecutions, which I find quite amazing. RSPCA provided 102,000 days of animal care, but the other role that they play, that we put the $500,000 in there for, is last year they adopted 580 animals, 151 dogs, 103 puppies, 118 cats, 115 kittens, 13 rabbits, 9 sheep, 1 horse, 2 guinea pigs, 21 chickens, ducks and 1 bull. Now, it's something I assure you that as my government's role, the Department of Ag, we're happy for this RSPCA to actually take that role. Of course, DAFWA administers the Animal Welfare Act, which RSPCA, of course, sits under, and that was only transferred to DAFWA on the 1st of July 2011. Before that, of course, it was with local government. And it's interesting that we have an MOU with the RSPCA, and I have to say we're just in the process of negotiating that again now. But in the criticism I had of the RSPCA was that some of their advertising that they put out with regards to the para-pearl, I didn't take umbrage to it, but I believed it was over the top when you take a ship that was in a situation of distress because it had done a bearing in on its propeller shaft, when it had a load of sheep on and returned, to have that fixed, and that was the right decision they made. And then, of course, there was an inference drawn in the press that this ship was, a bad ship because it had broken down and had lost 400 head of cattle on a trip from America to Russia, I think it was. But that ship had been rehabilitated, rebuilt and everything else since then. So I did write to them and tell them that I didn't agree, and they wrote back to me. And when we actually got to the actual inspection of those cattle on that ship, I'm pleased to say that the RSPCA actually put out a media release. I spoke to them. Our office was in contact with DAFWA, were in contact with them regularly, and they put out a positive report after they'd boarded that ship, and they inspected all the 7 levels on that vessel. I believe they have a major role to play, but I agree with the Honourable Rick Mazza when he was talking about the delegation of power, but how power can be used wrongly. Well, that applies to anything, unfortunately, and we've seen many cases of that where power has been utilised in the wrong way. A lot of them end up in jail. So can I say that that's something that I believe from DAFWA's point of view, we need to always be keeping an eye on that. I'll say in 2011 was when the West Australian Government doubled the funding to the RSPCA to the $500,000 a year, and that was a contribution to the RSPCA's activities in responsible pet ownership, education and enforcement activities associated with companion animals. Inspectors employed by the RSPCA are not limited in their enforcement activities and can operate in all sectors, including commercial livestock and feral and wild animals. And the interesting thing is that DAFWA and the RSPCA jointly enforced the Act in West Australia. DAFWA and the RSPCA work under a memorandum of understanding, as I said, which describe the exchange of cases, process for assistance, etc. All WA police officers are empowered under the Act, in addition to some staff from other government agencies and local government authorities are appointed as general inspectors under the Act with power to enforce the legislation. And as I mentioned, the current draft of MOU is being discussed now, signed off. The West Australian Government does not have the specific power to investigate the activities of the organisations such as the RSPCA. However, the Ombudsman and the Crime and Corruption Commission can investigate the activities of a public officer, which includes inspectors employed by the RSPCA. So, as I alluded to, if people overstep and use their power in the wrong direction, I believe that's in every one of us' responsibility to make sure that happens. Generally speaking, I think the RSPCA do an excellent job, and I can understand farmers taking it out of context, and that is that they actually, see a ship, see somebody protesting, and RSPCA comes out with a comment against animal live export, and I do know that's their Australian policy. However, I do not agree with it, and I don't support it, because I believe that, and having a look at one of the ships the other day, the shipping of animals has, the conditions have increased fantastically over the number of years, and they'll continue. But, and then the other point that was brought up was that if we don't actually have a say in live export, in other words, we are participating now, and with ESCAS in place, we are participating right through, and the countries where the animal cruelty supposedly happens to those animals, and we all saw that footage, is we don't have any mechanism for actually teaching them how to look after animals better than what they do or what they are proposed to have done. So it's important that we have that input, and by having livestock inspectors, etc., and auditors in the countries. I was up in Vietnam the other day, and I inspected a lot of cattle that just arrived the day before, and they'd come from Darwin and the Northern Territory. And then when the auditors, the Australian auditors, they'd just been there the day before. So it was an excellent thing to actually see that they have actually travelled over there, had a look at the facilities, the abattoir, and it was an ESCAS approved abattoir. So that supply chain control is very important. So Mr. President, my support and caution, of course, and I think it's very good that this motion's come to the House and that we can discuss these issues. But I believe that the groups that we need to actually be very cognizant about is these two, PETA and the Animal Liberation Australia. And of course, government is very aware that people are changing their minds, and we have to educate people. Just recently at the Royal Show, I think it's important that people actually see pictorial evidence of stock on ships, etc., and that how they are treated, how much space they have, their feeding facilities, etc. And these animals now on these ships actually put on weight. So once again, they don't lose it. Can I just... sorry? Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, it's a little bit like this place. Can I just say that can I just say that most animal cruelty problems are actually with domestic animals and not farm animals. I think that's a really important point, and that's, you know, some of the uses of the RSPCA. So the funding that the state government put in, I totally support, because I believe it's important for us to actually have a say in there. The board is set up by the RSPCA. I know in the past I certainly used to encourage my colleagues, my pastoral colleagues, to actually be a member of RSPCA and have a say in RSPCA, gives them the direction that they think RSPCA should take, and then I think that would be make it a lot better organisation if that was closely watched by the farmers that are concerned. And then farmers can work with the organisation to have that effect on animals in livestock shipping, etc. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
The question is motion be agreed to. The Honourable Stephen Dawson.
Mr. President, I too rise to speak on this motion and not to support the Honourable Rick Mazza's motion today. I, along with other members in this place, a couple of weeks ago, probably 4 weeks ago now, was very interested to receive from Field and Game Australia their conservation and hunting magazine, a glossy brochure. It must have been on a quiet day, because I'd certainly read it with interest, brought it into the chamber, and an article in here did too prick my interest, and that was the article about I want my RSPCA back. And I think it's fair to say other members, aside from the Honourable Rick Mazza, also have seen this, and I think the Honourable Simon O'Brien may well have alluded to this article in this chamber previously. And when I saw this article, I read it with interest. And given, as I said, it probably was a quiet day then, I immediately went on the internet and did some research on the RSPCA and the RSPCA in Australia. And what I found while doing that research was this article did not apply to our RSPCA in Australia, and certainly not to the RSPCA in Western Australia. The Minister, in his remarks a few minutes ago, made a very valid point, and that was the RSPCA is not the people for the ethical treatment of animals, or indeed the animal liberation activist organisation. You just simply have to look at the board of the organisation in Western Australia to know that these aren't political activists. These aren't the people who chain themselves to trees or to ships. These are real, everyday people. If you look at the members of the board, well, yes, the Honourable Lynn MacLaren is right to point out those people are real people too. That wasn't my point. These aren't real activists, was the point I wanted to make. Yeah. Look, the elected members of the board in Western Australia, we've got Lynn Bradshaw, who's the Director of Marketing for an ASX-listed healthcare company. We've got Ian Cowie, who's the CEO of a local government authority. We've got Jeanette de Langraft, who's a farmer and a Lake Grey Shire councillor, and will be known to many people in this place. Very successful farmer. Indeed. We have Brad Jolly, who of course is a senior government official, and a range of others. Don Thompson, a farmer at Tincurran and an Ag Advisory Councillor for Narrogin Agricultural College. Now, members in this place would have to admit none of those people are the activists that I alluded to earlier on. These people are people who care, who have a real passion, who care about animal welfare, but who certainly don't go on about animal rights, and are not hardcore, I'd say. I must have had similar notes to the Minister, because I too have got some information on the purposes and the activities of the organisation. But I might just point out that in Western Australia, the RSPCA has been around since 1892, and looking at their their constitution. This is the RSPCA WA constitution. It does talk about the fact that they ensure the enforcement of laws protecting animals from cruelty and promoting animal welfare. And they take whatever steps necessary to educate the community with regard to the humane treatment of animals. They do participate in public campaigns, but it's information sharing campaigns. I mean, if you look at some of the activities they're involved in, and you know, having spoken about the Dog Amendment Bill, or having debated that bill in this place this week, members may well be aware that the Million Paws Walk, a fantastic activity that happens in Perth once a year, where members of the general community bring their dogs, march them around the river, and if anyone's ever been there, there's probably thousands of dogs down at the Swan River on I think it's a Saturday or Sunday morning. Every day, West Australians, mums, dads, kids, out showing their support for... look, I certainly haven't paid attention, but if I go next year, I have to say I'll be much more focused, and I'll be keen to see if there are any restricted breeds in light of the Parliament's work this week, or the Chamber's work. But back to the Million Paws Walk. The RSPCA, as I said, do this activity every year, and they raise vital funds for the protection of animals in Western Australia. Some of the activities, or some of the things that the organisation spends this money on include providing shelters for abandoned pets, getting veterinary assistance for sick or injured dogs, and they've on their website. In fact, they list what some of the money goes towards. So $20 shelters an abandoned pet for one night. $60 provides a warm, safe bed for a homeless pet for 3 nights. $260 cares for a mum and her newborn kittens for 3 nights. And $480 will sterilise, microchip and vaccinate a small litter of unwanted pups. And then they go on to say, just by registering and fundraising, you help make a life-changing difference to these animals. Every dollar you raise helps us towards our $475,000 target to support vital work through the Inspectorate, Community Education, Animal Centre and Veterinary Clinic. So, I mean, the Honourable Member, Rick Mazza, was quite right to point out that, I mean, this organisation does get state government funding, $500,000 a year, but it's my understanding that they use it wisely. They don't use it to target live sheep, ships or anything as such. They actually do it to make a real difference to the lives of particularly family pets around the state. I too have looked at the websites and certainly was looking for sinister or anything sinister I could find. And yes, they do talk about how to lobby government to improve animal welfare. And they do talk about encouraging people to write to their local state or territory MP or to the minister responsible for animal welfare. But is that a crime? Certainly not. And in fact, I guess on a day-to-day basis, most of us in this chamber would welcome our constituents approaching us on a range of issues. And we too would tell our constituents to write to other members of Parliament or indeed the Minister to get the laws changed in Western Australia. This organisation certainly isn't a hotbed of activism, but it is an organisation that cares for animals in Western Australia. But yes, they do talk about the humane slaughter of animals, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Certainly they have a strong view on live exports, and while I may not have the same view as them on this issue, I certainly support their right to have a view, and I certainly support their right to advocate on behalf of animals, and I certainly support their right to put pressure on us all to ensure that animals are treated in a humane way and indeed slaughtered in a humane way. They talk about food labelling on their website, and particularly about consumers being able to trust that what we purchase in the shops, if the label implies higher animal welfare standards, the consumer is getting that. Again, I don't see that as a raging left-wing action. It's a very fair action. If consumers are going to the shops wanting to buy free-range eggs or whatever the fad may be this week, if they think they're paying for it and the label says they're paying for it, then of course they should be getting what they pay for. But back to the organisation itself. I mean, if you look at their mission, the RSPCA WA's mission is to improve the welfare of animals through leadership, collaboration with stakeholders, and the provision of top quality service. And if you look at, that was their mission, and if you look at their vision is all animals are accepted as sentient beings, treated with dignity, compassion and respect. All of these things I struggle to tie to activism. One final point I'll make is the general community does support this organisation, but they also get sponsorship from the likes of BHP Billiton, Police and Nurses, or PNN Bank, Channel 10, 96 FM. This is an important organisation, and I don't support this motion.
Members, we are dealing with non-government business, RSPCA, function and role. The Hon Paul Brown.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I agree with some of the comments that the Hon Stephen Dawson made there, that RSPCA are a very worthy organisation within our community. But whereabouts in our community does their worth actually stop? Where is the boundary with their worth in regards to their community concerns for domestic and companion animals as opposed to livestock and animal welfare? The honourable member just previously was talking about the mission of the RSPCA, particularly in WA, and I have a copy of their strategic plan in front of me. As he said, to improve the welfare of animals through leadership, collaboration with stakeholders and the provision of quality services. Now, through leadership, certainly, fantastic, but the collaboration with stakeholders and the provision of quality services. Certainly the provision of quality services, again, anyone that's been out to the Malaga shelter or other shelters that the RSPCA run, they would unable to question those. But their collaboration with stakeholders, one would have to question. Through 2011, after the Indonesian cattle ban, there was numerous articles which contain numerous photographs, pictorials. One here, Andrew Wilkie, Lynn White, Tom Maguire and Dr. Bitter Jones, Chief Scientist for RSPCA, standing there in front of Parliament House, both Tom Maguire, who is a vocal proponent of chilled meat exports to the and is always ready to highlight the failings of the animal export, livestock export industry. Standing there with Lynn White, who obviously is a rabid animal liberationist. They promote veganism, don't want factory farming of any animals, let alone farming of animals at all. And there's Dr. Bitter Jones, the RSPCA's Chief Scientist, standing there shaking hands with them and with Andrew Wilkie, who moved a motion in Federal Parliament to ban live export. So when the Honourable Member Stephen Dawson says that they actually aren't against standing or stopping livestock export, their policy has been for 30 years to actually do that. They actually campaign and stand alongside the campaigners. Another photograph and another article here where there's Lynn White and again Bitter Jones, Dr. Bitter Jones, standing with Simon Shake from Get Up, another very active campaigner against live export. The Act actually, the 2002 Animal Welfare Act in WA,
is now discharged under the Department of Agriculture. It moved quite recently from the Department of Local Government into the Department of Agriculture and Food. The Department of Agriculture is now charged with looking after animal welfare in WA. As part of that role, they also fund the RSPCA to the tune of $500,000 a year to provide services to the WA public. Part of their requirement is that they provide a 24-hour complaints receival call line and response capacity, inspectorate and compliance activities for non-commercial livestock and companion animals, and education and extension on responsible pet ownership. The agreement does not preclude the RSPCA from undertaking compliance activity in the commercial livestock sector, but though monies used for this purpose need to be raised from non-government sources and should not be part of the agreement. So I would question our $500,000 donation, shall we say, to the RSPCA. They are obviously quite active, both in an Australian, at a federal level and at a WA level. Lynn Bradshaw, the chairman of RSPCA in WA, has said quite clearly that that they will not change their stance on farming practices and also in regard to live export. So what I'm actually saying to the Parliament is that we actually have an inspectorate within the Ag Department that has 6 or more. The Minister may be able to correct me on that, but at least 6, maybe more, inspectors that actually deal with live export and farm animal livestock livestock welfare. You know, as
funding to them, actually.
Sorry?
We increased the funding to them.
We did. Now they actually have a funding increase that is up to $1.6 million a year to actually discharge that responsibility. I would suggest that the social licence that the RSPCA has is to domestic and companion animals, not to the livestock sector. Their expertise, their social licence from the majority of public is seen to deal with dogs and cats and budgies, rabbits, domestic rabbits that is, rather than hamsters, guinea pigs, and they do a great job of doing that. I mean, they receive over, I think it's 70,000 complaints Australia-wide for domestic animal abuse. That's where they should actually target their skills. Their skill set is uniquely targeted to those sort of complaints. The Agriculture Department, who have a range of people that know livestock and the industry, should be allowed to administer the livestock and animal export section of and farming section of that Act. I have got no problem with as I said before, no problem with the RSPCA administering to companion animals, to dogs and cats and pets, domestic pets. But I would question the need, now that we have put the Animal Welfare Act of 2002 back into the Agriculture Department, why now we need to have the RSPCA also performing the same role as the Ag Department. The industry, both the farming and the live export industry, have raised serious concerns with the RSPCA in their advocacy with Animals Australia, with PETA, with Animal Angels, with a range of organisations. RSPCA Chairperson Lynn Bradshaw states quite clearly that she wants to work with the industry to achieve an equitable outcome. But when your policy of 30 years has not changed and you want to remove live animal export as part of your charter, how can you reasonably expect the industry to work collaboratively with you? It is without exception within the industry a sticking point. Everybody recognises the crisis that the industry has with the RSPCA. In fact, recently the Dale Park, the president of the West Australian Farmers Federation, is calling for the WA government officials to carry out the inspections instead of the RSPCA, stating quite clearly that the RSPCA has become a lobby group and can't fulfil its regulatory enforcement role at the same time. It's the only statute that is administered by people other than government. So one would suspect that maybe a government instrumentality would be a far better source of inspectors rather than a lobby group. I reiterate what he has to say there. I think that that is an important point that the industry has raised, and I think that this House and WA in totality actually has to question the role that RSPCA is now playing within the wider community. Thank you.
Members, the question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Col Holt.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I'd just like to make a contribution. I think I would like to follow up on some contribution made by the Honourable Rick Mazza and the Honourable Paul Brown, because in my view it comes down to the credibility of the organisation of RSPCA. And we all know, and we know the history of the RSPCA and the good work that they do. And I think it was highlighted by the Minister himself that a lot of the animal cruelty acts are actually within domesticated animals rather than, or pets, rather than in the industry. And for me, that is where the RSPCA are doing their greatest work. And I think we all appreciate that they are our watchdog in terms of how the community treats our animals. And I know that also within the farming industry, they are probably our best animal welfare advocates in the whole of the state. I remember it wasn't that long ago, you know, Kojonup, I think, was pegged at 1 million sheep in Kojonup. Probably not that now, but you know, if that doesn't happen unless our farmers and our industry are the best animal welfare advocates that we have in our state. So for me, it's about the credibility. RSPCA, in my view, have got a great deal of credibility dealing with domestic issues. I think they are at risk of diminishing that credibility when they walk into the sphere of live export trade. I had a quick look at their website as well, and on the front page of their website there is a link to live export. And I just want to highlight that. There's a link to live export, and there's a little link that you can go to help end this cruel trade. So I went to that link and I thought I'll just check out what they're talking about there, because I think, you know, they've probably got some very valid points. We want to end cruel trade. Anyway, I went to that link, and there's another link there that says, a lengthy investigation and scientific report revealed extensive animal cruelty in abattoirs across Indonesia. Read the full investigation here. I thought I'll go to that and have a look at it. Now, can members, I don't know if you've been there, but maybe you'll be able to tell us who wrote that report. Animals Australia. So Animals Australia have a report on the RSPCA website. Now, that's got to be a balanced view, surely. A balanced view from the RSPCA. Now, this is where the risk is to the RSPCA's credibility. They're using an Animals Australia well-balanced scientific report. I don't think so. As their introduction to ending live animal export. I reckon if I dug a bit deeper, I'd probably find that video that came out of the Middle East not that long ago by a vegan activist, is what he called himself. A vegan activist that went into an abattoir with a hidden camera. Now that's got to be a balanced video, surely, on that. I don't know if it's on the website, but this is the risk. This is the risk that the RSPCA have, in my view. We want them to continue that good work that they do. We want them to continue the good work that they do standing up for animal welfare issues in our state. we don't need them to risk their credibility with the community, with the farming industry, by tagging themselves to activist groups that really do not have a balanced view on any of this. Does the RSPCA really believe that if we withdraw from live animal exports, that animal welfare outcomes will improve in those other countries? Do they really believe that? If they really believe that, then they need to go and get some more reports from other sectors of the community, other sectors of the industry that actually portray a different story than their own report there. I remember talking to an animal activist once about this. Do they really think if Australia stops sending live animal exports that we're going to see any improvement in animal welfare outcomes in Indonesia? And their response was, yeah, but at least our Australian cattle will be safe. Well, that's really a really narrow view of the world in my mind. We want to keep engaging into those export markets. We want to have a say about how our cattle are being treated in those export markets and those destinations. The only way to do that is to keep maintaining our presence in those markets. And we don't need the RSPCA risking their own credibility at the same time risking our industries and that animal welfare outcomes in those countries. So for me, it's really about that credibility. Now, move away from that argument or provide some balanced views, and we can feel much more confident about what the RSPCA can do for our community. We don't want to lose support for the RSPCA because they play a vital role for us, but we don't want to rest their credibility.
Thank you, members. Members, the question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Lynn MacLaren.
Thank you, Deputy President. Look, I was amazed that we're debating what the merits of the RSPCA today. I mean, any cursory examination of the RSPCA would show that it's a charity, it's got a board, it's an independent group from this Parliament. We are not the board of the RSPCA. This is not a place for us to debate the policies of whether, you know, they approve or don't approve of live export or puppy farms or anything else. It is not our role to be debating that. If you want to debate the policy of the government in its support of the live export industry, then bring it. But if you want to debate the policies of the RSPCA, you should really be nominating yourselves for the RSPCA board. And as the Honourable Stephen Dawson has explained, there are some pretty expert people on that board already, people that I respect, people that are making decisions about the strategic direction of the RSPCA on an annual basis in cooperation with their membership. And by the way, their membership are your constituents. The membership of the RSPCA extends throughout this state, and everyone who belongs to the RSPCA expects them to stand up for animals. It doesn't just expect them to run an animal shelter out of Malaga, which, by the way, they do a really good job of doing, but it expects them to actually be a voice for animals. And that's why I belong, and if any of you are members, I'm sure that's why you belong. Now, the RSPCA's vision is for all animals to be accepted as sentient beings with dignity, compassion, and respect. That's a great vision. And that's why people are attracted to donate to it year after year and belong to it and serve on the board. For us to even be considering trying to muzzle them, trying to stop them from speaking out for animals, is really, I don't think, in the best interest of West Australians. And that's our job, is to speak up for West Australians. The RSPCA is a community-based charity. Now, what other community-based charities do we know that lobby against government policies? Well, you could look at Anglicare. Why aren't we debating Anglicare in here? Because they certainly lobby for the homeless, and they lobby for more shelters, and they lobby for more public housing. Why don't we talk about Anglicare? Why don't we talk about the Australian Red Cross or the Cancer Council or Amnesty International or any one of the 350 or so charities that operate within Western Australia who have reason to question government direction, who have reason to speak up for people who cannot speak up for themselves in this room. And so, so honorable member, I, not surprisingly, oppose your motion. But I do welcome the debate about, what advocacy roles are out there in the community and how is the government involved in them. Because you have brought up that really important question, and the Honorable Paul Brown was one of the people that brought up this question of who is better placed to inspect farming activities, And right now, our government is and has historically failed to ensure animal welfare in the agricultural industry. And that is why the RSPCA is picking that up. And I just want to talk a little bit about this welfare versus rights, because I think it's great to have animal rights people. I think animal rights people, speak up for the animals when no one else will. So there's a place for them in our society. They're not to be, disdained, spoken to about as a negative thing. Lynn White is a hero to many people in Western Australia, including me. But the issue of animal rights versus animal welfare, one of the basic tenets of animal rights is that humans do not have a right to use non-human animals for their own purposes, which include food, clothing, entertainment, and vivisection. That is based on a rejection of speciesism and a knowledge that animals are sentient beings. And may I say that Peter Singer, who is one of Australia's finest regarded ethicists around the world, was the father of the animal liberation movement. And his name should be revered, not spoken to as if he is some, lower class citizen. Now, he has a chair in Princeton University. He is an ethicist of immense respect. Now, the reason why we're in this area about farmed animals, there are many that believe that humans do have a right to use animals for some purposes, but believe that animals should be treated better. And you will have heard me talk about this time and time again. And that is what we're talking about with live exports. The position of treating animals better, but still using them in the farming practices, is an animal welfare position. And that is exactly the space that the RSPCA operates in. So they want to, now, just to explain, animal rights want to eliminate the use of animals. The animal welfare position seeks more humane conditions, and the difference between these two positions can be applied if you look at farmed animals. And I'm just going to list a few of the issues that are dear to my heart. I know that there is an animal welfare position that object to cruel factory farming practices, and I know we do too here. Any cruel practice to an animal should be objected to, and they do it, like confining calves in veal crates, confining pregnant sows in gestational stalls, debeaking chickens, and as I brought up in the last term, keeping sows in crates when they're pregnant. So these are things that they work on. It's about making it more humane within the farming space. Now, an animal rights group doesn't want any animals to be farmed anywhere. And when you look at being an animal welfare activist, there is no more powerful group than the RSPCA WA, and that is why they are well supported throughout Western Australia. Now, some of the things that they're working on, they discourage pedigree breeding that causes discomfort to dogs. And you will have seen, stories on 60 Minutes or whatever with those dogs with the disfigured faces so they can't even breathe. That's what the RSPCA worked to stop. They stop the cruelty inherent in live exports. How can we question that? They stop the confinement of laying hens in small cages. And right now we're poised on, significant changes around Australia to free laying hens from those confining cages because of the overwhelming public support for that move. And they want to bring an end to puppy farms. Now, what is scary about that? I think it's a great thing that the RSPCA are doing. And of course, it involves public pressure to change the laws. They have every right. We will defend their freedom of speech to challenge laws which cause cruelty to animals or perpetuate cruel practices. So I'm amazed that we haven't heard from the Honourable Nigel Hallett, who spoke out last year and questioned the government funding for the RSPCA and did quite a bit on radio promoting that notion. At that time, the public was shocked that, that any West Australian parliamentarian would threaten to remove funding from an organisation as significant and well-respected as the RSPCA. I can't believe that that soundbite in the media has now become a measure for debate in this chamber, and we have now taken, we will have taken almost an hour, I think, or 80 minutes actually, to debate this in this chamber. Now, members, I encourage you to lift your sights higher and think about how we can stop cruelty to animals instead of how we can stop an organization whose very purpose is to stop cruelty to animals.
Members, the question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Brian Ellis.
Madam Deputy President, I hadn't intended to say much on this motion, but it's just, it must be just something about the Honourable Lynn MacLaren that seems to get me going. It takes a fair bit. It takes a fair bit.
Whatever does it for you.
But, Madam Deputy President, I endorse what has been said by the Honourable Rick Mazza and the Honourable Paul Brown and the Honourable Col Holt. We're coming from the same page. Let me say from the outset, though, that I do believe the RSPCA performs a very valuable function in our society, but that's in trying to prevent cruelty to animals. And no one wants to see animals badly treated. But also let me say from the outset that I believe that the live animal trade to other countries that need our produce is not a cruel trade. And I suppose that's where we differ. I mean, particularly with the Honourable Lynn MacLaren, she believes it is. It is not a cruel trade. And that's where I think this whole argument's coming from. The RSP is interfering in a trade that is highly regulated. What other export produce or exporters are responsible for their produce when it lands in another country? No other trade, I think, has got the same regulated and responsibility for its produce as it gets into other countries as this trade has. So that's why I say this is so regulated that the suggestion of it being cruel, I just believe, is wrong. And, Madam Deputy President, that's where I think that the RSPCA has overstepped the line. Has overstepped the mark and got out of its core functions. And I agree with the Honourable Rick Mazza that I want my RSPCA back again too, back to what its core functions are. And I don't really like the idea of it interfering in a legal export industry that puts farmers, and perhaps they should be thinking about the economic welfare of the farmers instead of the so-called welfare of the animals. Getting into bed with extreme organisations that have been mentioned only reduces the RSPCA's credibility and its relevance. The RSPCA receives something like $500,000 of public funding, and I think it should become aware or be aware of the responsibilities that go with that funding. That and consider the whole community and not just radical groups that seem to be hell-bent on stopping a legitimate trade. and stop working against good, hard-working citizens who are trying to make a living. I understand the position that the Agriculture Minister is in. He needs to work with a reputable organisation, and that is a legitimate organisation that works with the Minister on animal welfare, not an organisation that works against that trade with radical groups. And they should be actually working with the Agriculture Minister to promote this trade, because as has been pointed out with the Honourable Col Holt, you stop this trade, animal cruelty from other countries will carry on. This is the only country that does have these regulations to make sure that the welfare of the animals are cared for right through, as I say, into the other country. And just on that too, it's in the interest of all those people in the industry, the farmers, the traders, the exporters, to keep those animals in the best condition that they possibly can. If you really want to boil it down to just the money, they need to keep them in the best condition possible to get the best return on their dollar. So, once again, I have to say, it is not a cruel trade. It's a legitimate trade. And as I said before, I think that they should be working, the RSPCA should be working with the Minister to promote what is a legitimate, highly regulated and well-run trade. So I can only endorse what the Honourable Rick Mazza's moved today and point out to those that oppose it, don't be surprised that we fight back, because you've got it wrong.
Members, the question is that the motion be agreed to. There being no further speakers to the motion, and the opportunity stands for the mover to reply. The Honourable Rick Mazza.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. At the beginning of my speech, I wanted to make it perfectly clear that I believe that the RSPCA does play a very important role in our community, and a lot of that was played out here today. I think the real concern, though, is that, as the Honourable Hon Holt pointed out, we don't want to risk its credibility. Unlike Anglicare and other charities, the RSPCA is delegated special powers of prosecution and investigation into animal welfare, as it should be. The reason that we are discussing that in the House today is because, unlike Anglicare, it has these government powers given to it, along with $500,000 worth of money granted. So if it's going to be debated anywhere, it should be debated in this House. This is where we as members need to have the courage to play out these things that are on an emotional basis. Not run away from it because you think you might get a call from the ABC radio talkback or Channel 9 microphone put under your mouth. This is where it needs to be discussed. So what we're talking about here is ensuring that the RSPCA as an organisation is accountable. That is the whole reason why the motion's been put forward today. If we are going to extend those powers to the RSPCA, then like government departments who have those powers, they should be scrutinised and they should be accountable. Members, I am concerned that animal rights ideology is beginning to seep into the RSPCA. And with all respect to the Honourable Lynn MacLaren today, some of those comments are quite evident. If we've got vegans running around with video cameras, that to me is a conflict of interest. Members, I ask you to support the motion, and hopefully we can ensure that the RSPCA continues to be a credible organisation that plays the important role it does in our community.
Members, that now concludes consideration of non-government business, and we now move on to private members' business. And the motion concerns the resources industry economic contribution and is moved by the Honourable Mark Lewis.